equal pay for women. And I understand there was a barrage of commentary from Monique about her experience with Netflix. And I understand you, Jewel, have done some research on that. Can you tell us a little bit about it, and maybe the other ladies can discuss it with you?
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic right now, because the situation with Monique is that she was approached and wanted to do a show on Netflix. And Netflix only offered her $500,000 for the show, and she was offended because she actually is an Oscar winner. But more importantly, she was offended because when she looked at the industry trend, what she found was that her colleagues, including Amy Schumer, was offered $11 million and then actually able to negotiate up to $13 million. And then Chris Rock and David Chappelle were offered $20 million from the same network to do a show. And so when she put it out there, what I loved is the sisterhood in the moment, because then Wanda Sykes said, you know, me too. She said, they offered me half of what they offered you, Monique. They offered me $250,000. And so it really gives us an opportunity to peel back the onion on this issue of equal pay for women.
I think that's a very interesting point you made, bringing up, because this past weekend we had the women's marches that took place in several cities across the country addressing some of these very issues. But I think what's important to keep in mind is that not only is it a gender issue, it's also a racial issue. And so when you look at how divisive our nation is becoming, women and women of color continue to be on the lower rungs. And so when you look at cities, urban areas, and the plight, how they're underserved and just not having the resources and opportunities, it's these very types of things that fuel and feed that type of activity that we're seeing coming from Netflix as well as others.
Exactly.
I know that, as a longtime educator, we worked a lot with women and girls to get into higher wage occupations, and so there's been a huge push for that. But I think now some of the women and girls are maybe not as excited about some of those careers because they feel that there's less hope about having that equal pay for equal work. So I think there's a lot of work we have to do in terms of inspiring them again to show women and girls that have gotten equal pay that it still is possible, so they feel like there's some advocacy for when they're in those economically independent jobs, then they're going to be paid appropriately for those things. So we have a long way to go in that.
AAUW has some specific tools that we've developed. One is called Start Smart and Work Smart, and that helps with learning these tools about how to go about and negotiate, so they have a much stronger position they're coming from, instead of saying, oh, I got a job, and just take it. Right. They do their research, they have the tools given to them, and practicing. The Baltimore AAUW branch just recently did Work Smart session, and they helped 25 local young women to learn how to use those tools to have a much stronger stance when they go in for these job interviews.
But one of the things,
Go ahead, please. I don't want to be devil's advocate, but I love what Jules said earlier when she said that it's not just equal pay for women versus men, but it's also equal pay where women are concerned. If you have two comedians that are equally as phenomenal, equally as talented, why then would one get paid more than the other? So and it is a racial issue. Your statement was very profound in the sense that there's so many layers of the onion that needs to be peeled back. So even if we have young girls that are trained to do the research in our communities, when they do this research, they still don't have, and I guess I want to say the empowerment or in the position to negotiate those terms, because they will simply be told, well, we just can't, we won't use you. So even if we say, we deserve the same pay for the same experience that our sister is getting who is of another hue, they'll say, well, we just won't use you. So so the fight is still a struggle for us versus just it being a fight against our pay in reference to what a man would get paid.
But you bring up an interesting point I was about to go to. So I do leadership coaching with individuals and teams, and one of the things I've started to look at seriously is working with girls in public education, and I was most inspired by the docufilm Step of some girls in Baltimore Leadership School for Young Women, and how they were nurtured and mentored to overcome what may have seemed to some as insurmountable odds to graduate and be accepted into college. And so it begins with us looking at how we support girls to get to the point that they see college as viable, and not that college is the route that everyone takes, but you begin there to build esteem and self-worth and confidence that gets you to a position to do what Monique did. Because if we don't say, no, that's not acceptable, then we will settle thinking, oh, I got this great deal on Netflix. Well, the great deal on Netflix may not be as great as you think it is, and there we find the imbalance in equal pay because we're so hungry to get a place at the table and to be in the game that we don't even recognize they're buying us cheap.
Absolutely.
But Kate said something really interesting, and I want to take us back there too, because that education piece, particularly helping people understand the industry that they're going into. And you know, there actually was federal legislation that helped us pull back the curtain and understand and have transparency around wages. And actually in 2015, Obama signed Executive Order 11246, Pay Transparency Regulations, which gave HR companies now the permission to allow people to talk about what you make. And they actually had to publicize it. And so it's being able to know that you have those resources out there. I am sad to say that just this year, it was rolled back by this our new Republican regime. So, you know, we have to figure out how do we actually advocate for that policy again, because that gives them tools.
Well, we have it here in Maryland. We've got legislation that's been passed in Maryland about that.
Excellent.
But we, and AAUW is working with testifying and better laws and so on. But I would like to go back to talking about the young women and understanding, but I don't know about you, but I know when I was growing up, I was steered. So, well, I wanted to take a math class. I said, you're not going to need geometry, you're fine.
Yes.
And so they limit, you're steered, and that's still going on. And we have to be working, and AAUW is doing that as far as encouraging young girls to go into STEM careers, and we have many programs that help promote that. But to have that across the board, that no matter who you are.
We know that in certain counties and jurisdictions in the state, counselors have been trained, so they're not saying that as much, and many women and girls have greater exposure. But I will say, having worked with other school districts, it's not necessarily the same. So one of the things that the center is trying to do, we'll be taking role models into the Langston Hughes Community Center. We hope that bringing in women engineers, and we'll be having an informal setting so that we can talk about those areas of pay equity and some of the strategies, how they can initially get into that. Or if a person is not able to get right into engineering, what are the avenues to get into that career pathway, and how to find scholarships or mentors or other role models to really keep that possible. To make it possible. Maybe not the first year, but keep them going on that pathway.
But Diana, you bring up that notion of balance that says, yes, we need to nurture and mentor our girls, but we also need to expose them to opportunities that help them to understand that today our young people live in a global society. And there's some young women that I have become affiliated with, one a mentee of mine from years ago, that have started what's known as the Black Girls Global Exchange. And what we're doing is we're looking to take Black girls from Baltimore City Public Schools on a global experience. And along the way to getting there is to instill within them some tools and information and knowledge to help them feel that they can do anything, that there are no barriers, that they can dare to dream and know that those dreams are possible. And by touching points with their peers around the globe, they can begin to understand, hey, you know what? Me too, I'm able to do. So that me too is not just a negative, but me too is I'm included in the world for what I bring, my talents, my dreams, my aspirations to achieve greatness.
And
Well, this is one-
those aspirations are not limited by any means, and the experience itself will allow them to see that the world is bigger than what they've been exposed to. Absolutely, and that speaks volumes in itself.
And you know, it's a perfect segue to our next topic, because exposure, right?
Absolutely.
Our next topic, we're going to talk about homeschooling versus public schooling. And recently in Riverside, California, we learned about the Turpin family, which is David and Louise Turpin, who had 13 children. And they said that they were homeschooling their children. And what we learned, though, is that those children were living a nightmare in the home. And so what we want to talk about is what's happening in the homeschooling industry versus the public school sector, and should homeschooling just be able to happen the way that it is now, without any regulation, without anyone coming to check up on these sites, so that we don't have these types of situations happen again?
Maryland's a little different. In my professional life, I worked for the State Department of Education and a local jurisdiction, and there was a level of oversight in those programs. So I'm not saying, of course, the case in California was a tragic, horrible, extreme example, but I think that situation is going to hopefully tighten up some of the other regulations and oversight. But in many cases, it's been a matter of funding and staffing of who are going to monitor those home site visits. But I think the other question is Maryland, or are we committed to public education? Are we committed to sort of
partisan polling,
right,
partisan ping pong, basically is the way to put it.
Good put it.
And Diana, to your point, I'm sitting here as a former legislator, knowing that it takes participation by citizens to make an issue rise up to the point of getting funding. And going back to the Women's March, and all these things are connected and tied together. And so the question, I was in a conversation earlier this morning about the Women's March. So what is the outcome? Yes, women are coming together and marching, but what's the step beyond that moves it from an event to a movement? And that's where we are right now, taking it to the next level. So here we find ourselves, 2018 midterm elections. What's going to be different? That women's issues are really going to rise up, because women's issues are society's issues. And that's the connection, that what we do doesn't just impact women and girls, but it impacts the quality of life for us all. And I think education is a prime example and a wonderful entryway into having impact, so that more girls understand the importance, as they become women, the importance of voting, the importance of participating, the importance of expressing their voice, their issues and concerns, if ever we're to see change come about.
Also, I want to say, Jules, that this case is an extreme case for the most part, and I think it made the news because it was an extreme case. I homeschooled my children in Baltimore City, and you're right, Diana, the rules and regulations are very different here. There's a report program that has to happen, which means when you're homeschooling your children, you have to send quarterly reports in. If they decide to go back into the public school system, they have to be tested to make sure they're on the right grade. So everything that they would have to do in school, as a parent, you have to produce that work. So all of their yearly assignments has to be produced when you go back in front of the school board. So it's very, very different. The only downside I found was, one, the public school systems did not provide for my children as African Americans. It's our greatest investment as a society, and it is a human issue. So anything we talk about where women or men or anyone are concerned, it's a human issue. So you're talking about human rights.
Absolutely. And I think it's absolutely wonderful that you homeschooled your children.
It was tough.
My daughter
It was
wanted me
hard.
to, well, that's my point. My daughter wanted me to homeschool her, and I said, I can't do it. Some people don't have the patience, don't have the time, or the resources, like many of the women, they have to work to bring in money to help support the family. But I think where we can, in the public schools, and all of us working together, is to help young women, young girls, find their voices and know that they have the power. They don't have to have somebody telling them what to say, what to do. They have ideas, they have strength, but we have to really encourage and develop that young girls use their voice and learn how to get that, help build their self-esteem.
Because
with
this
various
process
programs.
is generational.
Absolutely.
It's from generation to generation to
Absolutely.
generation.
And if you don't have somebody who's a great role model in your family or around you in your schools, it's tough. So that is where I think, as parents and as teachers, educators, and community activists, we have to be those role models. We have to be those role models.
That's our
And reach-
responsibility.
Absolutely.
That is absolutely.
Well, ladies, this has been a fascinating, informative bureau right here. However, we want to change and we want to talk about the rise in crime amongst our children. Now, Jules, I understand that you've researched this suicide guy, Logan Paul.
Yeah, Logan Paul was his
Paul?
name, and he had a channel that teens actually follow. He has a very large following of young people. And he went to Mount Fuji and to the suicide forest, that's what it's called, at the base of the mountain. And it's a place where people go and they actually commit suicide. And so he actually filmed that, and because it was filmed, YouTube pulled his channel, and he actually lost sponsorship, and he's no longer on the air because of this. But it raised the issue of what are the issues that our young people are dealing with that would cause them to consider suicide or even to turn to acts of violence within the community.
Jules, what's interesting is that Logan Paul's following was in excess of 11 million teens. And what that says that we have to be cognizant of is that we live in a high-tech society. Most young people have smartphones. It doesn't matter how many filters you put on it. They get access to this information. And so once something goes viral and talking to their friends or what have you, they're watching it. They're tuned into it. And so they're getting information without the filter of an adult that says, no, you don't need to watch this, or even dispelling whatever is being propagated as this is not healthy, let me tell you why. And so it goes back to how do we parent our children in a high-tech society when we give them smartphones and tools so that we can stay in communication with them, yet we don't have all of the resources and capabilities of filtering what they're able to get from the internet.
Well, I think in addition to the filtering, we have to look at sort of the root causes. In many schools, of course, we've talked a lot about the issues of bullying, boys and girls, and a lot of the issues surrounding gender identity and all that, and the negative, often the very negative school climate that goes along with that. And so youth feel sometimes they don't have an option, or their options are so limited, and they're usually not positive outcomes. We know there was another incident in a school in Kentucky yesterday. The young person was 15, and that was in a very small, close-knit community that is, so if it happens there, it can happen anywhere, obviously. But so what are we doing in the schools and the community to sort of help kids feel like they have other choices besides so many negative choices for themselves and to hurt others?
I want to say that it is anti-social platform, because when we give our children these smartphones, I think something turns off. The social connection with other people, seeing 11 million teenagers, look at this and watch this, and some of them I'm sure over and over and over, the message is so phenomenal and so frightening that a 15-year-old will go into a school with a gun and murder his peers, that a child can look at suicide as an option before their lives have even bloomed, and that someone can take a gun and see another human being and see his or her life as having no value, and decide that this person is doesn't matter. It's not important. And so, when you see that, that's a breakdown in society as a whole. It's not exclusively the responsibility of the parents, it's not exclusively even the responsibility of the community, because she just said this child was in a close-knit community. My son was in a community where he was so loved and so held accountable for his actions. My son was murdered March 26, 2017. And his life was taken because the person who murdered him was hurting. That person was in pain, and we all know that hurt people, yes. And so someone looked at him and decided that his life had no value. When a child commits suicide or a young person commits suicide, something inside of them has said, my life has no value. As a society, this is a scream. All of it is a scream that we're disconnected with each other, and our children are being disconnected. I don't know what the solution, I do know what the solutions are. Let me not say that I do know what the solutions are. I'm going to give someone else the opportunity to speak so I can gather myself.
Well, I think some of the biggest problems is we've lost on the understanding about the meaning of the sanctity of life.
Well, they see so much killing. I mean, the average child before they're 18 months old has seen over 1,000 homicides on TV.
Or they have lack of hope.
Or in the video games. So what are some of the solutions? Because we know as a collective, as a society, what these problems are. They're not going to stop selling guns. They're not going to stop with the messages that if 11 million children or young people can watch someone who has hanged themselves out of utterly and total despair.
So I'm going to go back. I'm going to interrupt a minute and say, I'm not going to say that it's not going to stop. I'm going to say it will stop when enough of us understand the severity of what it means to our children. And our children are our future. But we can no longer afford to be bystanders on the sideline waiting for someone to come along and save the day. We must jump in and be they
Active participants.
that are going to get in the game and get off the sideline. Have our voices be heard. And this is just an incredible opportunity for women and men to advocate on the side of what supports life.
What supports life?
But it also means that we have to take on the industry. Because each year, more than 20,000 children and youth under the age of 20 are killed or injured by firearms in the United States. That is NRA. Oh my gosh, I said it. Yes, we have to take on the NRA. There is no reason why they cannot create guns and firearms that young people could not trigger. But they don't do it because it would cut down on sales. They don't do it because nobody is really pushing and advocating and going up against them like the ones who are advocating for guns.
Or the legal process of how to do it.
Or to even ask for a higher tax on bullets.
Yes.
Well, it's a Second Amendment issue.
Yes.
Let's get to our Constitution.
That's right.
It is a Second Amendment issue. And so the point is, okay, you should have the right to bear arms. But do you need to have the right to bear an M16 or a semi-automatic weapon? You don't need a semi-automatic weapon to go hunting. You know, you don't need a semi-automatic weapon to feel safe in your home if you're going to have a firearm. And so it goes back to advocacy. It goes back to being in the game and not letting it go. It means being like a dog with a bone that's like, I'm not quitting until change comes about.
Yes. I think what we have to do is, it comes to education. Educating our children on how valuable their lives are. And we have to do that relentlessly. We have to also educate them on violence and teach them, how to be safe, how to protect themselves, how to just have a pro-life perspective and a hopeful perspective of what the future looks like for them.
You have to realize that a lot of what's happening in Baltimore City with our young people is perpetuated by gangs. And so young people are hungry
To belong. To belong.
They're hungry
I
for,
agree.
for a place of belonging. And so what we have to do is we have to go back to the old African proverb, which, you know, the
Takes
old,
a village.
hello, it takes a village
To raise a child.
raise a child. It takes a village to raise up a community
Absolutely.
out of despair
Absolutely.
and to
Into
help
hope.
people, yes, into hope and to help people understand that the best is yet to come.
Yes.
If we lock arms and work together one by one.
Well, ladies, gangs are another topic that we can talk about in the future. However, I'd like you all to talk about your advocacy again and what you're here to make a difference in our community.
Well, with AAUW, we work with young girls in trying to instill in them that they each have special gifts to be developed and that they have a power within themselves to really make a difference, and try to help them find their voices to take them each step closer to their goals. You can find the information about AAUW, aauw.org, or aauw/maryland.org, to find out about the various programs that we have to promote women and girls.
And we are providing a lot of programs about STEM exploration. We'll be working in the community with role models. Also, we're working a lot with the Suffrage Commission, showing how that the history of the right to vote for women is very much applicable today, and that fits in with Women's March to make it real to young adults. And you can get more information on our website, which is mdwomen'sheritagecenter.org, or you can call my cell, 443-996-1788.
And we're having an event February the 17th with our Victorious Cities. It's called the Emerald Dinner. It's a scholarship fundraiser for the Victorious K. Swift Scholarship Fund, the Homicide Survivor Student Scholarship and Teacher of the Year Award. And you can find that information on ourvictoriascity.org. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Helen Holton here. Dr. Helen Holton and Associates is a Maryland certified MWBE, providing business development consulting, executive leadership coaching, and team facilitation and training to for-profit and nonprofit organizations, helping them move from being stuck to moving forward to their next level. Please visit our website at drhelenholton.com. That's drhelenholton.com, and follow us on social media, or you can reach us at 443-364-8581. Thank you.
And I'm Jewel Stunham Howie, and my firm is Jewel Enterprise, and I work with nonprofits all across the country, helping them build their infrastructure and be able to meet the needs in community. And you can reach me at 410-462-0162. I am very proud to be the associate producer of this show, and we are grateful for all of our guests that have joined us at our inaugural show. And we're going to actually take a moment now to celebrate the life of Victory's son. Let us hold hands, ladies.
His name is Victorious Swift.
Yes. Victoria, this is us taking a moment for Victorious. And it's a moment for Victorious, but it's a moment for everyone out there who doesn't feel like their voice is being heard or that they have a place at the table. We want you to know that you do. We thank you, and we hope to see you again soon.